One surprising cause of my post-surgery bariatric regain was one that I only recently discovered. Are you fighting bariatric regain and struggling to figure out why? If so, this sneaky culprit might be impacting you too. You know, it's terrifying. I had weight loss surgery back in 2002 and I remember thinking, I'm never going back. There's no way I'll gain weight. I've worked too hard. But I did. Just a little at first, but the scale kept creeping up until I regained half of what I'd lost. I could identify some of the reasons for my regain. I was indulging in nutritionally lacking foods way too often. I didn't put my self-care first, and my mindset was all out of whack. But as I began to unravel the mess I had created that led to my regain, I uncovered a very surprising contributor. I'm going to share it with you in just a second, but first, if you're curious to learn what it is, would you be willing to do me a huge favor and smash that like button so I know that this topic resonates with you? Okay, a drum roll please. The sneaky culprit was my ego. And I hope you'll hear me out on this because it could impact your journey to right size if you don't know what to watch out for. Ego. I'm not a fan of that word ego. Does the word ego bother you too? Share what you think about ego in the comments below. In this episode, we'll unpack the ego. We'll explore how ego can get in your way, and we'll talk about how to put ego in its place so it doesn't become a roadblock on your journey to right size. Okay, so let's unpack this thing because ego is tricky. If you were to ask 3 people the definition of ego, you'd get 3 very different answers. That's because it's so complex. In this simplest form, your ego is defined as your conscious mind, the part of your identity that you consider yourself. In the world of psychology, ego is considered part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. Personally, I think ego can be really confusing. Sometimes it can give you confidence and fuel your self-worth, and that's a really great thing. But at other times, it's the know-it-all teenager inside of you. It's the side of you that sometimes gets a bit caught up in body image. It can be the control freak in you. Bottom line, if you're not paying close attention to your ego, it can show up in ways that can block your path to right-size living. Let's explore 3 ways it commonly shows up and how to put it in its place. Number 1, it can create resistance, largely because of that know-it-all element that often lurks somewhere deep inside of you. Before surgery, you tried countless ways to lose weight and elevate your wellness. So many that you might have built up a resistance to new information. I know there was a time that I had no problem dishing out my opinions on dieting, what works, what doesn't, but I wasn't receptive to what others wanted to share with me, especially if they were skinny. I think it's because I felt more like criticism coming from a skinny person. Made me feel more self-conscious and uncomfortable about my weight. For instance, if one of my thin friends tried to give me advice, my ears would just close up and I'd think, they don't know what they're talking about because they've never really struggled. It's easy for them. Never once did I stop and think, maybe that friend knows what they're talking about. Maybe there's one golden nugget hidden in what they're sharing. Maybe they're right size because their beliefs and habits around nutrition and movement. I had the same attitude towards doctors, nutritionists, and fitness gurus. In my mind, they had not walked a mile in my shoes because they'd always been fit and right size. So my ego said, they don't understand me and what I'm going through. Why should I listen to them? When in truth, many probably had valuable advice to share that could have benefited me. The solution is to work to replace any ego-fueled resistance with curiosity. Curiosity is a beautiful thing. Instead of writing people off who you perceive as not having walked a mile in your shoes, be curious. Shift your thinking to ask yourself, what can I learn from this person? This doesn't mean you have to accept, believe, or try what they suggest. It's just being curious about a new perspective. It's about being open-minded. One thing that helped me is to start asking questions. Instead of thinking someone else's approach or recommendation won't work for me, I ask questions like, how do you make that work? What challenges did you face in doing that and how did you overcome them? Being curious can open you up to a perspective that could have the power to change your life, whether a little or a whole lot. Number 2, another way ego gets in the way is that ego makes excuses. I don't know about you, but when my ego gets unleashed, It makes countless excuses for why I might be larger or why I might be gaining weight. After all, it couldn't possibly be my fault, right? Share with me in the comments, do you relate to any of these? I have a slow metabolism. I'm big boned. Menopause has hit and my hormones are out of whack. It's my thyroid. My spouse or friend is sabotaging my efforts. It's the holidays. I can't possibly make changes at a time like this. It's the stress. I can't do the movement because my knee hurts. I'm too busy. So what's the solution? The solution is to tackle the challenge. Here's the thing about excuses. They're often grounded in some level of truth. You might truly have a slow metabolism. You might truly have a thyroid issue. You could have someone sabotaging you. You might have an injury that gets in the way of moving your body. But here's the thing. We don't lie down and take defeat when we face challenges. Heck no. We find a way to work through them or around them. If you have a medical issue, you might have to work harder to make changes than someone else. Is it fair? No, but that doesn't matter. You're dealt the hand you're dealt, and you've got to work with what you have. You might have an injury that gets in the way of exercise. Find a workaround. What can you do with that injury? There's a member in my Facebook group, which, by the way, that Facebook group is shared in the information below this video if you're interested in checking it out. Anyway, there's a member in the group who has some pretty serious physical obstacles. She inspires me every day because she's figuring out what she can do. She began working at chair yoga, slowly able to do more and more. And when I first met her, she had started trying to climb the stairs. After months of persistence, she not only mastered getting all the way up the stairs, she managed to get all the way down them too. It was super scary and challenging for her, but she's doing it. No excuses. So no matter what your excuse your ego might throw your way, look at it as a challenge. How can you work around that challenge? The third way ego shows up is in judgment. Yeah, most of us have egos or a little judgy, not necessarily of others, but of yourself. I think so many of us can relate to Oprah Winfrey because she's been so brave to share her battle with weight in the public eye. I was reading a story where Oprah shared that in the past her size was closely tied to her ego. She said, I actually thought at the time that being thin made me better. In fact, she shared a story about how gaining or losing weight changed how she viewed herself as a person. After her much publicized weight loss in the 1980s, she chose not to attend a party Don Johnson had invited her to because she gained 5 pounds. In her words, she said, I didn't go to that party because I thought the 5 pounds made me too fat, not good enough to be at Don Johnson's party. Share with us in the comments below. Can you relate to that? Are there events you've skipped because you felt too big? Are there times you've punished yourself because you felt too large? Are there times you've stood in the mirror and berated yourself for how your body looks? Are there times you beat yourself up for eating a piece of cake? The solution is acceptance. If you're constantly beating yourself up or judging yourself, your ego is probably playing the perfectionism card. Change really begins with loving yourself. It begins with accepting yourself. Accepting yourself requires a lot of practice. It requires a major shift in your internal dialogue. It requires a shift to understanding that mistakes happen. Look at your missteps as lessons learned instead of failures. A good friend of mine lost about 80 pounds 15 years ago without surgery. And to do so, she made some pretty significant changes to her lifestyle. And when I asked her how she made such a shift, she said, I let it go. I let it go. And what she meant by that is she stopped trying to control everything. She accepted that there are things in life that she cannot change or influence. She let go of those things and simply focused on the things she could control. It brought such a sense of peace and serenity to her life. And it's so interesting. It was when she let go of the things that were out of her control that she achieved right size. Ego isn't all bad. It has a positive side too. It can fuel your confidence. It can help you love yourself as you are. But when it comes to right-size living, the resistance, excuses, and judgment often tied to ego are not helpful. So practice on curiosity, tackling the challenge, and finding self-acceptance. In other words, drop the E in ego and let it go. Before we end today, I want to share a quote by Jillian Michaels. She said, a bad day for your ego is a good day for your soul. Wow, that makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Until next time, my friends, live with purpose, live with courage, and live with delight.